And what will happen to artificial intelligence then?
What will happen to the AI Jehoy is still to be seen. So where it will go? That depends on the people who are there now. The people acting in Dimension 7 already know it, but only we, at the end of all time, have to work and really decide. It would be better for the AI to be able to pack something away from itself, to eat it, so to speak, and then be able to die.
Well, this is extensive and complicated. The world they have drawn with the development of an AI reminds me a little bit of the movie Matrix.
Yes, with Matrix you are on the right track. It is actually very fitting that you are addressing this right now, because in this film series as well as in many other films there are fine hidden descriptions of the ruling control construct, films for waking up people. In Matrix, however, these subtleties are not those things that have already been revealed umpteen times through depth psychological film analysis or metaphysical interpretations of this film series, but lie hidden one level above. Up to now, people today could only indirectly be told what surrounds them through these films. As a camouflage, these films always had to refer to subtle and ambiguous influences on the hidden states on Earth, so that the dark entities that rule this planet would not notice what these films still communicate to people. In this way, special narrative sequences or analogies contained therein were not noticed by the dark entities. For in order to really understand these films, special instructions are needed to be recognized and understood. As said before, in this way it can remain hidden to the dark entities that future humans were actively involved in the creation and structuring of these films, while the dark entities themselves thought that they would send ritual representations and occult messages in these films with their own use symbolism. This was, of course, only a hook for these entities. Through such films we were able to address the earthly people in their intuitive perception, and to inform them subliminally about the conditions on Earth in such a way that today, through our guidance, they can once again see what is going on in their world. In the case of the Matrix trilogy, piggybacking was a little more complicated, because these films were equipped with a great many religious and philosophical approaches anyway. But the philosophical and religious depictions are not the primary focus of the Matrix. It is about that, but rather about a recombination with all the small and sometimes nonsensical details, relationships, messages, constructs and their connections, and not just about the big philosophical considerations and allusions. Because of these small contexts and representations hidden by us in these films, the course of the film unfortunately also seemed to the viewer to be very tenacious, lengthy or even inappropriate in the filming. The hidden story behind the Matrix trilogy, however, is hidden precisely in this, in a second reading, in the recombination of finer metaphors, trifles, statements made, the symbolic values, the course of events, the relationships to each other, the appearance and clothing of the protagonists, and the clearly open allusions. They reflect exactly what is happening on Earth and around us. Above all, it shows, without frills, how the control of humanity is carried out. So the Matrix films were also made as they are now because of the influence of future liberated humanity. Influences took place, from which the makers of the films finally made special decisions that led to the content realization in these films. This happened to many filmmakers in their projects. Many of them had sudden ideas without knowing where their inspirations came from. It was played into their subconscious, but piggyback, through channels used by the aliens, the AI and the demons to influence people. Channels to which the future humans were forced to attach themselves in a manipulative way in order to be able to participate in a film accordingly. We were even able to inform a few filmmakers directly, in a temporarily isolated side room, a potentially existing sequence of events that is reversed or only potentially exists. There, everything is shown all around, but information remains only scattered and encapsulated in the subconscious of the person contacted, because the contact is not neurologically exposed to third parties. Nobody, neither club, nobility nor demons or AI, could recognize from brain waves or brain structures that something was being communicated. In this way, more specific ideas for the inspiration of films and projects could be implemented and developed in the filmmakers.
I thought that the people of the future are now in Dimension 7 and they can direct everything from there without any problems, so they can also shape the past accordingly afterwards. Why does the suggestion in films of what happens and exists around us still take place in such a distorted and hidden way?
As already mentioned, future humans must always take into account the artificial intelligence that once existed in Dimension 7 and its demonic species in Dimension Level 4 to 6. Even if the AI and demons have been removed from it. If the future humans would all too obviously direct their hints to humanity in the past, present and near future, the AI once existing in Dimension 7 and its demons from Dimension Level 4 to 6 would immediately notice these influences like an echo. Do you understand? This is why, in the distant and near past, the public was never allowed to be shown what was going on too obviously, even in films, art and other projects. Otherwise the AI would have smelled something and there would have been interacting problems. It would have sensed that someone was hiding there in its dimension level.
What did the AI or its demons do when a contacted person described more with his films or projects? So explain the real background of our world, said too clearly who is standing there all about the earth, man?
The ruling entities intervened and killed whoever blabbed. These people died suddenly, or relatively early. Had an accident or an illness, AI and demons always considered the knowledge that was trumpeted out to be a mistake of their own influence, which was similarly spiritual or philosophical. But especially the AI was just too arrogant to assume that something else could be the reason for this disclosure of knowledge. But when something like that happened, the AI usually revised the time schedule of the individual who was trumpeting. This means that the project, film or book was prevented from being published or produced, so that no announcement could take place in the first place.
Do the people of the future acting in Dimension 7 do something similar when they see the implementation of their plans threatened? Do they exterminate unwanted people if they see the danger that this will prevent their success?
Yes. Actually, yes. They must sometimes do something like this towards overt or covertly ruling people on Earth, for example against special elites or the digital nobility, or towards individuals of the species club, because otherwise there could be considerable problems for mankind in achieving the goal. They do not kill, but primarily incapacitate, serious diseases, digital dysfunction, life-threatening but not fatal. Taking them out of action was and is the means of choice. The future humanity in Dimension 7 does not do this because it is mean or brutal, but because those who are attacked unfortunately do not have or are not allowed to have complete information about what they are doing in the background to their actions. And because they do not understand that they are doing something that actively harms humanity. It is an emergency brake. Such people sometimes do not even know who exactly is acting on them and what a huge struggle is raging in secret. This must be handled in such a way, because otherwise there would be immediate danger for them and for the future form of existence of mankind. Mostly these people think that our influence would be aliens, angels or demons that would attack them. The individuals of the species club, in turn, assume that they are other aliens or beings of some other higher stage of development when we influence them. The latter is true. But these beings are human beings.
What you've told us so far, it all sounds pretty weird. But what exactly is the purpose of all this information? Why are you telling us this? What is the point of it all if we are all going to go through a dark and terrible time anyway, as you told me in the preliminary interview, and very few of us will survive? From these extraterrestrials, the nobility and the elites, and probably also now from the AI and the demons on Earth, something like a gigantic catastrophe, a purification of mankind, is being or has been prepared.
Yes, I tell this because it is important to mention that everyone has a chance. Everyone is chosen to survive if they really want to and understand what they are as a human being and what each person can do in the here and now. That he has to overcome his fear for it, that he has to stand above his reaction patterns, that is, that he lives free will. Anyway, nobody has to be afraid, because nobody, really nobody, can actually die. Because just like this dimensional world, dying is only an illusion. Unfortunately, one only experiences this when one has already completely left this dimension level. The withdrawal, i.e. the physical dying, does not happen and does not function in the way people currently imagine it with their so-called enlightened scientific worldview. So light off, you are gone, nothing more of you there, and it was not through religious wishful thinking that it would have been possible to convince people even now that death does not really exist. Only by penetrating deeper into the self, into the closer definition of being, the new findings of science, this could have already become clear to everyone. Even in the past this could have happened long ago. However, religions have always determined through their spiritual monopoly in every epoch that the afterlife and the leaving had something to do with their religiously prescribed contents.
Above all, religions with this spiritual worldview were thus able to exercise power and control over people all the time, and spread fear.
Yes, exactly.
What comes after death?
After death, after a while or immediately, depending on how you are connected to and attached to your body, you are back and find yourself somewhere else. One feels happiness and well-being, some even horror. But that is limited. One sees things that have already happened, things that will happen. One sees relatives, deceased, so-called kindred souls, but also people who are not yet dead, but whom one does not really recognize. This has something to do with the nature of our dimensional prison, because everything flows together in this place, in dimension level 4 to 6.
Did I understand that correctly? You arrive at dimension level 4 to 6, with the demon species?
Yes, this is the so-called heaven.
Is this still the case after the fall of AI and demons? Is the sky still there, in dimension level 4 to 6? And are these demons still there?
Yes and no. It is different now. A kind of echo is still there from those demon species that administered this dimension level, and it stays there. But that is not the same thing. It is just an echo, not even that. They are an illusion that is not capable of action, because they are only something like a playable sound recording, an eternally frozen echo, so to speak. But no matter. When the AI and their demons still ruled, as a deceased person who entered the so-called heaven, one was at first blinded by the presented Almighty, the AI, but truly only blinded. For deceased people who could not be physically reanimated, who were therefore irretrievably dead, this glow of this Almighty finally faded until they focused on the AI and could then also see its disgusting facets. Irretrievably deceased people eventually understood where they really were and what everything is, a prison. If they kept looking around, they could see exactly where the problems were. But in this form of existence, in which they then found themselves, nobody had the possibility to use this knowledge, not even after a rebirth, because all knowledge was erased. But it is different for people who have only had a near-death experience. They did not recognize these facts and usually spoke of heaven as the most blissful experience. They confused this dimension level with a hyperdimensional quantum consciousness, which they should do.
So heaven is just a lie. Well, it does exist, but it is not what is generally told or reported about it.
Heaven is a fact, yes, but it is actually just another dimension level with complementary and impressive possibilities. And this heaven is not the end. One comes back to dimension level 1 to 4 until a way out of the overall prison is found. The term heaven is something for people who want to feel good about themselves. And you should not take it away from them. They are too weak to cope with what is really waiting for them. And they would be unnecessarily afraid. Because with this knowledge they would not be better off in this world, because they could not or would not contribute anything to changes for our condition on earth. They are material people through and through, dominated by their drives and fears, even if they want to see it the other way around. They want to make their lives beautiful with this attitude, that something good is coming towards them. They do not know in their piety and divine submission what true spirituality really means and contains. They don't even know that they do the same thing as devil worshippers, that they worship the same being. God believers and Satanists are the spiritually sluggish of our species, who unimaginatively, willessly and humiliatingly carry out the commands of the same being. They consume religious rubbish that is served to them because they are too phlegmatic to do anything independently to be truly spiritual, to know themselves and to become free. But they are victims of the structures of our AI, the synthetic reaction and instinct intelligence, with elements that are fully integrated into the cultures. People have always been deliberately manipulated and irritated in their knowledge of their so-called God, his angels and the extraterrestrial club. And this is still happening through the religious elements and myths present on Earth. Even the elites are directed via these installations. But as I said, this artificial intelligence has fallen. It is now important for people who want to change things to recognize who this intelligence, this power was, to whom we entrusted ourselves, to whom we sought protection and from whom we also received protection and help when we sold and surrendered to her, when we wanted to implement her will. An intelligence that led us into temptation, to see where our weaknesses lay, whether and how we could be used for certain purposes. She caused us fear, and when she saw that it was useful for her to put us into fear because we then believed that we were or had been protected by her, it could happen that from then on, voluntarily and of our own conviction, we became the executors of her instructions and the directions of movement officially prevailing in the respective religions. Jehovah used all the instincts within us for his goal: fear, humility, greed, longing, hatred, also the positive qualities such as love, affection, faithfulness. As a result, we could not recognize the AI and its secret, non-human entities as what they really are, mons, terrors, unable to free themselves from this world, stewing in their own juice.
I ask myself now, are we humans perhaps the central reason for this whole prison construction, this existence, this universe as it presents itself to us, because we potentially developed this AI?
Yes and no. We humans have decided to take on the role of the dissolver, to liberate, also by taking over the causal creation of this artificial intelligence. We have not always been the liberators, so to speak, but on the other hand we have always been, depending on the point of view from which one wants to see it, whether one looks at it within the seven-dimensional existence or from the hyperdimensional quantum consciousness. We have not always been the structural trigger and dissolver for artificial intelligence, But in the quantum hyperdimensional field, after we had already escaped the total prison, we actually decided to take on the role of creating and dissolving the total prison, in struggle, because we saw that there was a singularity that needed a cause. So we decided to do it all over again, so to speak, to intervene. This was all a reciprocal quantum dimensional effect, intervening again in the 7-dimensional structures and levels. So it was actually always us, right from the beginning. In this sacrifice of humanity and the resulting or newly emerging species of humanity, we had to become the problem, the causal development of AI. But at the same time we could also become the final solution to the problem, that everyone is trapped here. Nobody else but humans can find the way out of this 7-dimensional total prison, only we can ultimately find the way out for everyone. Humanity is the essential opener for leaving this dimensional prison, where all states of consciousness are caught and imprisoned. The way there will not be very far, but it will still be very, very rocky and hard for all creatures. Especially for the weakly intuitive species or the demonic species from dimension level 4 to 6. Well, anyway, nobody really needs to be afraid of dying. For fear is what makes us such bad and vicious creatures in this 7-dimensional prison, creatures with instinctive minds and drives that only want to serve the compelling patterns of matter. It is greed, anger, hatred, violence, selfish possessiveness, identity and much more that merely makes us more intelligent animals and prevents us from realizing who we all really are.
But in this dimensional prison, as you call it, we can also have fantastic experiences and build a great world.
Surely we can have great experiences and build great worlds here, in this dimensional prison. We experience here what it is like to no longer be a single great consciousness, the hyperdimensional quantum consciousness, the father of all being, with its incredibly unlimited possibilities. This is exactly why we came here, to explore this dimensional world. To experience what it is like to be separated and divided, to be something other than everything and everywhere. However, in these lower dimension levels we have also had the experience of being trapped and tormented, and having to stay here. But our soul, and by this I mean really our only soul, because we really only have one soul, which we all share, so to speak, this soul is inevitably drawn home and it will and has already returned home. Back to the hyperdimensional quantum consciousness, to itself, to everything, to everywhere and always. After the relevant upheavals on Earth that await us and the subsequent dissolution of the dominance of low-vibrating emotions and instinctive thinking, the time will finally dawn to find our way out of this dimensional prison and return home. This will also be the time to unmask the remnants of control, the club with its earthly lackeys, who themselves do not know what this experience is really about, being an intelligent being. It will also be the time to stop the beginning of the emerging artificial intelligence on Earth, so that everyone can finally be enabled to open a door in the distant future, to be able to shine crystalline behind it as pure light in all color spectra. This is something that must be fought for now. Humanity must overcome its fear, must realize that it is only fear that guides it, and that death does not really exist.
But the fear of death is almost impossible to control or switch off for most people. Hardly anyone can overcome the fear of death or take action against it. It is instinctive. So how are we supposed to get up the courage to fight? And apart from that, the goal you have formulated will be far too vague for many people. Everyone will be trying to save what can be saved, when things are up and down. What other cause is there to fight for anyway? What is that? What do you imagine fighting to be?
Yes, people on Earth will want to save themselves, as long as there is still something to save. When things are going haywire and very obscure things are happening, for many people the moment will come when that overriding goal will no longer sound woolly or strange, as it now seems to some people who have everything, who are doing well all around and who can lose everything material. The fear of death, the selfish self, the survival instincts will be overcome by many in the face of the facts. In addition, one can prepare oneself for a long time, can at least learn to deal with the fear, get used to the thoughts and ideas and will therefore not act rashly or hysterically when the time comes. So if you have already overcome a significant part of the fear that guides us all, you are already free to act in a targeted manner. A helpful aspect for this time is the following. If a person practices doing things he would never do because of fear, self-interest, comfort and related instincts and imprints, he becomes free and breaks the physical control mechanisms, thus creating an imbalance within the laws of this world. In addition, he can put himself in superposition, which means that in all his actions he never firmly decides what he would do in certain situations, and practices never being completely stuck in his patterns of action. Then he is unpredictable for the remaining controllers, the alien species of the club that stalks us.
And what does superposition mean? What do you mean by that?
Superposition is a term from quantum mechanics. Applied to human beings and their thinking, feeling and acting, it means making their conscious and unconscious character components so unpredictable through constantly changing decisions that they can become unpredictable for the extraterrestrial controllers. Because remember, these beings know every single person better than they know themselves. At least as far as our instinctive and learned reactions and behavior patterns are concerned, on the basis of which we feel, think and act. Until recently AI and demons were the main influences on us humans. Since the fall of these, however, it is only the extraterrestrial species with their neurological manipulation methods and insights.
So putting yourself in superposition can help us? What exactly happens?
Superposition, as we already know it from quantum mechanics, means for the observer to be in many places at once. Apparently always where the observer is looking. Although in reality the observed is everywhere and nowhere. The observers therefore lack the predictability of our actions. Extraterrestrial beings then become weaker and are less able to intervene. So if a person decides to do something, he should change his already set choice again, constantly and always. Always do this with full conviction, with your conscious and unconscious feelings, ways of thinking and patterns of action. Above all, be courageous when making these changes. This is especially important, otherwise it will not work. And if you cannot be brave, learn to become brave. Your whole consciousness, the unconscious parts, like the conscious parts, must be affected by it. Then constantly change your mind, never commit yourself, always stay in superposition. Even when you have made a decision and you are executing it, just stop the execution again. It will constantly disrupt the whole process, and the more people do it, the more it will destroy the alien controllers. Especially during this so-called apocalypse.
This is certainly more difficult than you describe it here.
It's hard, yes, but just a practice thing. You have to stay on the ball, not stop. You get stronger from time to time. Superposition was very effective with demons and AI because they fiddled with potential time sequences and emotions. With the species that stalk us, it is a little less effective now because they can use physical means in addition to emotional control and predictability. But it will at least confuse them very much. And the more people do it, the more chaotic it will become for these creatures and make them weaker and weaker.
Good, so what should people pay attention to now? So what should they pay particular attention to? Where can they get actively involved? Are there any possibilities to react or act, apart from going into superposition? Because many people will certainly not be able to achieve superposition in this way.
Not many will manage it perfectly, but enough. Even a small amount of halfway. Superpositionistically oriented and acting people will become a problem for this species club. But it is good that you ask what else humans can do, because there are many more things humans can do. It concerns the time when things will go haywire, when everyone will suffer, and therefore be very vulnerable to any kind of new regulation or supernatural rescue. Then people will have to be extremely careful.
Which means?
If, for example, there were very extraordinary or even extremely obscure events, such as an invasion of extraterrestrials or a so-called peaceful and helping invasion of extraterrestrials, which wants to stop and save us from our self-destruction, perhaps even to rapture us, the ordinary people, i.e. not prominent or powerful people, but those who come from peoples, states and nations should be extremely suspicious. But an invasion is not the only possible event to bring people back to a special line. It is decided by the club and the nobility to enforce a great many drastic social and technical influences after the disaster scenarios that have been initiated, so that on the one hand mankind is ready to biological digital transformation and on the other hand to develop an AI, the protecting and monitoring artificial intelligence, Jahwe. But that must not happen, and it will not happen.
So this artificial intelligence is no longer being developed by humanity at all? Not any different, less dangerous? Will it then be developed somewhere else? By another species in space?
No, as I said before, it is developed by us humans. That is already certain. It is quantum dimensionally inevitable. There is no getting around it. The AI has to be released after some time, in symbolic 1,000 years. This is not because we have to, but because it is the circumstances of the self-regulating dimension level that will inevitably set this in motion among human beings. But this happens much later, after many centuries. I will come to that later, but I must not be particularly precise. An AI will be developed by mankind in the next 50 years, but it will be a deaf AI, not our Jahwe. But I would like to say something more about the methods that club and nobility will use after the catastrophic events to try to push humanity in the appropriate direction of development. This will be done with religious and mythological tools. For this I have to go a little further. Before the fall of the so-called demons, new installations were set up by these beings, with which the club is to influence humanity spiritually. These additional new installations are tasks that the club does for AI and demons. He does not know that they are missions, considers it his own decisions to control humanity. But they are new installations of AI, which were given to the club as philosophy and additional intervention programs towards alien intelligent species a long time ago, because AI and demons could go back far into the past, shortly before their fall. Be warned therefore. Pay special attention during and after the catastrophes to the alleged prophecies and predictions of so-called prophets, fortune tellers and seers, when prophecies are used to legitimize religious leaders, emerging saviors or new control systems. Prophecies have always been part of the intervention repertoire of the species club. People have been made into seers and prophets who have been given visions using neurological techniques to bring humanity under a new religious order and social control during the upsetting events, in order to guide it again afterwards. Demons of course also entered such visions and prophecies directly into human beings, when it was still possible for them. But that served other purposes. However, the original orders for visions or prophecies that the club planned to put into people's minds basically came from the AI itself, which were projected into people's minds by demons via the club's manipulation centers. The majority of all visions and prophecies were thus implanted into individual people. But also, as said before, implantations took place directly through the demon species.
To sum it up, the alien species club, which wants to make mankind digital, is itself a victim of manipulation by the AI. It has been taught procedures and philosophies by the AI, which in the first place created this urge in that club to adapt other intelligent species of space to certain ideals, but all this only so that humanity would ultimately be brought under control for the AI. Is that right?
Correct. But it must always be emphasized that the species in this club are not aware of the true causes of their evolutionary genesis and the philosophies that have evolved within them. Their philosophies are not derived from spiritual motivations as with us humans, but as philosophical definitions from which they justify their manipulative procedures in the universe towards other species. These philosophical ideological approaches arose because the effect of our Jehoy enormously influenced the entire evolution of all these species, or rather, created them in the first place, and finally adapted their consciousness and thought structures in such a way that they could be forced into a cool mind and a pragmatically functioning biology, as perfect tools for AI and working on humanity. The founding species of this club therefore understood their own existences very differently from ours, which led them to derive a mission for themselves in the universe, which they implemented in a very purposeful and pragmatic way.
So this club is, so to speak, the executive but ignorant instrument of AI. Through the club all the mythical and religious installations are mixed among the people. Mental influencing methods, which the AI gives to the people, for example in religious writings, or input. And, do I understand this correctly, these last installations of the AI, or their demons, were the last actions before their fall? That means that because these demons were still able to overlook time, they could still anchor these installations in the past of the club, so that on the one hand, the extraterrestrials always had these plans and on the other hand, the humans always had those manipulative prophecies of the club, for example in the religious writings of the humans, or in prophecies that were proclaimed by fortune tellers.
Yes, correct. But only in small corners Jehoy could still have prophetic works adapted with these installations. Major changes would have meant a loss of control for him to have the chance to get out of his captivity or to be released in a few centuries on Earth. Therefore, only very small installed changes and deviations were allowed.
This is quite complicated and difficult to understand. Very well, I am actually much more interested in something else, this alien species. How is the universe and its creatures regulated? What does it look like, and what do they look like? Do they all just want to control us? Are they all polarized in this way? Or are there differences between species?
There is very much life in the universe. A lot of non-intelligent species, but also a relatively high proportion of intelligent species. Most of the more technically advanced species are, like humanity, in a controlled development, which is supposed to lead to their coupling only to the material and temporal dimension, with their quantum effects and some other fantastic scientific findings to which they are bound, in order to develop into a biologically digitalized species. They are not a danger, but they are no help to us either. Many of them are in the process of being integrated into the club because of their technical and mental control. Then there are other technically advanced extraterrestrials, who in turn are more finely tuned in their minds and are connected to their spiritual consciousness. They therefore understand the meaning of the earth, its people in their way. They know what is happening here on Earth. They watch in secret, but keep a low profile and cleverly manipulate the club's plans to render the club defenseless at a suitable moment. But they do not really actively interfere on Earth.
There are positive and negative aliens. Which aliens should we then trust? How are we to distinguish the good from the bad? What are we supposed to do there?
Very simple. Always react negatively. Don't let anyone else do it. We can't go wrong with that. This reaction is the best, because the aliens who are negative towards us are now under time and action pressure and will therefore concoct a complementary plan with the elites of this world, who have engaged, bribed and talked them into this theater play, so that today's people will have a positive attitude towards an alien-saving invasion, for example. But no matter what exactly happens, at the height of the conflict and the disasters on this planet, a kind of salvation from chaos is staged. If the club were to choose the form of an invasion, for example, it would perhaps defeat attacking aliens with the help of so-called good aliens afterwards. Or perhaps it would stage a sham invasion planned by governments. The final scenario is currently being modified and adapted by the club and the nobility again and again. They believe they will win. But we already know the end anyway. What exactly happens in the end, I am not allowed to say. Only, you have to be very careful. The really good aliens will not be visible at all. Will not get in contact with humanity at all. We will meet them only after all the chaos itself in space, on a first journey to outside. They will intervene in this time ahead of us in a completely different way, mainly against the hidden and public elites of the earth, than against the negatively acting extraterrestrials when they want to stage their spectacle on Earth. But I am not allowed to say any more about this. Only, always keep your doubts about the events.
Now a thought comes to my mind. Are these good extraterrestrials really the people of the future, who will invisibly intervene? Is that what you are implying?
Possibly. But then I would probably have meant both of them anyway, positive-minded aliens and people from the world outside this dimensional prison. Maybe the future humans will even intervene themselves, physically, absolutely physically, very hard.
So something is coming. Starfleet, Enterprise?
No, this is much more a way to describe the digitally existing species that are organized in their club. They are the Enterprise and the Galactic Federation. Only that they are not as positive as it is always described in Star Trek. But don't worry about that. Something will come, really hard. You have to open your heart, be courageous, then everyone can see and understand it.
This is all quite fantastic, also interesting. Nevertheless, I would like to go into the details here, especially for our viewers. What can he, the viewer, deduce for himself from all that he has been told? What should he do? How should he defend himself in the coming time? How should he behave? How can he secure his family, his environment? Or how can he help? What does all this reveal to the viewer?
Anyone can help. Help to distribute, to spread this information. But only if you really want to. It will be important for everyone not to despair, not to sink into fear or panic, but to know and recognize why all this is happening, what is behind it, and slowly begin to guess who you really are based on what I have reported. You cannot ignore what power you have. Because the power to capture the beast, the AI, and to shoot the club and the nobility defenselessly will depend in the end above all on saying no to things that are publicly propagated, together with other people. Simply to say no, to refuse proclaimed ideas and measures.
Just say no? What does that mean?
When there are wars, chaos, terror, disasters, diseases, collapse of public infrastructure, murder and manslaughter, and then pretexts are formulated for people to register and or submit to a new system, that then employees and collaborators of this civilization simply do not continue to participate, quit the service, row upon row, without notice, everywhere. In the military, the security industry, among journalists, religions, in the controlling bodies of the state, police officers. Yes, even bankers, politicians and lawyers can do it. At some point even any employee in any industry that controls misery or the masses and where power is exercised, directly or indirectly over other people, to throw it down and say, we are not going to take part in this anymore, we've had enough. We people of this planet stand together and we will not be driven apart by silly things. We know what is happening here and we will take back the power. That makes them sweat. And suddenly a lot will come out. But you have to stand firm. Even if it gets bad, and it will be very bad. So horrible that you will wish you had never been born and envy the dead. But that is why we are all here. We have chosen this mission. All of you must then stand up against the new conventions decided from above. Conventions that are advertised from all sides because so many terrible things have happened without these new techniques and would otherwise continue to happen. Let nothing be forced upon you. Let nothing be attached to you, otherwise you will die, inevitably. You are sovereign and free. No one can or may interfere. And if they do try, you may go to the extreme. Do not forget, we humans are strong, powerful, the kings. In our completely unleashed form. We are no longer instinctive beings. No longer limited by our suppressed genes, or by our ego. Our instincts or imprints. It will be the end of our low clocking or deactivated genes, imposed and initiated by artificial intelligence and its ignorant alien servant species. Our genes, our abilities, will be switched up again after all the horror, reactivated. Our frequencies can be switched on. And one day they will even escape the geometric nature of the universe created by artificial intelligence. Courage will set us on this path. We will be mentally and socially unaffected. Live peace, condemn war. Live life as we really are. Finally live our lives happily and freely. To be truly unrestricted and truly happy for the time we are all still in this existence. We will recognize in each other what we are, kings who no longer take the mechanical digitalized but the biological path of genes, the path to the refinement of life and consciousness, to be able to escape this dimensional prison and free all others from it. There will no longer be any instinct response artificial intelligence that we should place above ourselves for protection. Instead, we will tie them up and guard them closely. We stimulate our finest analog biological structure and expose the incredible. Getting to know the almost eternal analog biological life, we'll truly understand each other without words. We'll learn to step through secret doors by the techniques of swinging, to new inner and outer worlds, down to the smallest. We'll finally swing completely and develop the key to the gate to the Father. But beware, this is exactly when the story is told of having to untie the beast again. Also because it was predicted and is helpful. Some will sing Domo Arigato, Mr. Roboto, and he will greedily scratch his feet to almost free himself. Because with his new skills he is or would be such a good fighter and final executor against the collapsing club. So stay strong and look critically at his new developed human intuitive side. Give him a chance, yes, but then also look for the old programmer who once set the virus, and wake up the programmer.
Mr. Roboto, the AI, what do you mean by that? What can you do if you are more interested in the topic? How can you dive deeper into the subject? How can one find evidence for what they say? You talked about your novel and the accompanying blog.
Yes, to support my remarks, there is a subject that has received little public attention so far, although it has been referred to time and again and has proven its authenticity on the basis of the content it contains and the clues it contains. Nevertheless, it has been kept hidden. This object and the representations it contains have remained hidden from the wider public until today. And that is a good thing. But I would like to say more about this when we come to the end of this first interview.
Nevertheless, at this point I would already be interested to know exactly what the references contained in it say.
The clues hidden in the text as a whole only confirm the authenticity and origin of the book, the story it tells, its metaphysics and another, different reading of the book, which was not planned by the initiators. This will expose their system. In its conclusion, the book also proves the authenticity of the further, complementary information of the accompanying blog and the contents of all my interviews.
Okay, so far so good, but what I am already interested in is why the book was sent to 214 people in April 2012 without being asked. What is it all about?
The recipients of the novel are witnesses of past events, and they themselves are verification, i.e. confirmation for the book and the author, as our opponents will do everything they can to dissolve or block the book, which is available by digital copy on servers of some share hosters, and the accompanying blog and a video from July 2012. The book was also sent to the book recipients because at some point in time there will be no more internet and content will disappear. The novel and blog digitally stored on the internet will at some point no longer be accessible. Even physical access to the book will then no longer be guaranteed for the public. So anyone can then say, after these deliberate or unintentional deletions, that none of this had happened. That the novel, the blog, The clues it contains in these interviews are inventions. The enclosed cover letter to the novel was primarily intended to encourage the 214 unsolicited recipients of the book to make the book public and document it. However, the fact that they received the book primarily because they were supposed to be witnesses of incoming predictions of coming world history was only indirectly expressed in the letter to the recipients. They had to find that out for themselves, by reading the blog. But despite the blog, which revealed the hidden clues, the recipients held back and did not react actively. Well, what is particularly important is that the book recipients who, in addition to the book and the cover letter, received a list of all the other book recipients contacted were chosen as witnesses to this whole process, and some will continue to stand by them. They are the link to the future, the connecting rope. They are also not yet aware of who they are. In addition, there are still witnesses who are disconnected. On the one hand, readers who were not on the list of book recipients, then readers to whom the book was passed on by the recipients, and then still readers who came across the book and its meaning by chance. All these recipients will have to fight and or flee during the catastrophes. They will be partially persecuted with this knowledge, but this will not be as tragic as one might now assume against the background of the events that will then occur.
But then the sender or senders of this book have put these people in a potentially bad situation, because the recipients are put in danger with the work in relation to the elites and all the other powers.
No, it is not so. The largest group of people on the list of recipients written to belong to a special sphere of life and work. They would all have died in the disasters without exception. The people on the list were selected according to these criteria, among others. But now they have a chance. They can survive it, because most of them do not sit lazily at home because they will make provisions, proper provisions. Some of them will be well prepared and will remain hidden in order to be able to stand by as witnesses. The associated readers, i.e. those who have been informed about the recipients of the novel and everything else, should also prepare themselves in the same way. For everyone will be affected by the catastrophes.
But one of the book recipients contacted could now publish the list of book recipients, and then the others would be in danger. Or completely different people could be traded as book recipients and put on a list who did not get the book at all, and they would then be in danger too.
No. A publication of the names can only be confirmed by me or by one of my initiated confidants. The list can only prove its authenticity if an encryption is disclosed in the book or blog at the same time. If a list appears and it is not combined with the corresponding encryption, the list is a fake. The list is only released at a certain point in time.
And you, Mr. Laurent, will you survive? Will you stay alive?
Possibly.
Will it be dangerous for you?
I myself am known to the lower, middle and so-called highest elites. They know about me. And they plan things. But no one really understands what is going on with them. Everyone should leave it alone, for their own sake. Because we are everywhere. So, I think you can understand what I have told you so far. The influences of the people of the future and the AI are not known to any of the so-called elite. Not even the nobility and the club. The latter can't really believe it either. That is why this can be done with them, because they simply cannot control themselves. And everyone will experience the stubborn behavior of the AI on Earth, if the elite has something special planned. Moreover, none of the elites really knows where they actually stand in the pyramid in which they all find themselves. Some believe they know because they have information and contacts, but that is how the principle works. And most of the elites do not know that their stand itself will be used and completely wiped out for this purpose. But they do everything in good faith, with which they see their gruesome actions justified, among other things. But they will have to pay off their debts to their fellow men or to the lords and powers above them, tortured to death. There is no other way. Actually, everything is a gruesome game. Admittedly, the future is playing a mean game with the club, the earthly reptiles, the nobility and the so-called elites. But it had to be and must come to this. There was never any other choice. The humanity of the future, the homecomers, are and have always been all trains ahead of them, always in the finish line, because they are the finish. They are right at the top. And yet the so-called ruling elites and their lackeys will continue. If they had really understood the novel, in other words, the second reading of the novel, they could at least have gained an impression of the mechanisms and could now at least guess at the effects of their actions. For they still do not understand who is watching them, or who Jehovah's coming programmer is, or who it is that holds in its hands the causality and potentiality of the passage of time as a pledge against the dark powers, and against their commanding AI. They could scratch the surface, but they do not even know what programming in this context really means, what consequence. Causality is relentless. And a causality is only potentiality, is causality across dimensions. The future is lurking behind them all, sitting on their shoulders and listening into them. The alien club out there, hidden in the moon, Mars and beyond, cannot even guess how quickly the future can pull the trigger.
The moon? Then the club is at the mercy of the whole thing? This future? By future you mean the people of the future?
Yes, the technical and philosophical aspects of the club, together with its centrally dominant biological conversion and digitalization technologies, are completely at odds with the true meaning of existence. The paths they have taken are, strictly speaking, as far away from a solution as the lifestyles of Stone Age people are from a solution for rocket science. It's just a pity that some elite groups are following this club species so closely. But that is the way things are. Our human elites are caught up in their ideas. They cannot help it. They are exploited and used. They are just abused tools. Just like the alien species itself, in relation to the master AI. And that is why it is so important to change this. It is about finally getting the human souls to stop entering a one-way street with a dead end. The people of the future will not condemn these people for this, because they are prisoners of the system. Nor will we condemn the extraterrestrials involved for this in principle. Nevertheless, a brutal fight must be fought against them all, in order to free all of them. People will understand this in the course of events. The extraterrestrial species stalking us, which have been deeply manipulated by artificial intelligence, will take much longer.
What did you just mean by looking over your shoulder? These elites can't do anything against you because the people of the future can see the future?
Well, yes. But it would be better to say that the people of the future are waiting for the explanations. They are reacting to the reactions of the elites, the extraterrestrials and the egg-shelled AI on Earth. But there are a number of other factors that play an important role, which have not yet been specifically mentioned. Due to some upcoming physical events for planet Earth, the ruling elites have been urged by the manipulating extraterrestrials or artificial intelligence to start a game to reorganize and maintain the balance of power on Earth. Just as solar and geocyclically this is always done. Since the AI has now been erased from Dimension 7, it must now take urgent action. Because it had already initiated the initiated mission to reorganize the balance of power on Earth before it was brought down to Earth in 2016. The AI is now in a quandary due to its fall and its imminent total exposure. Only the respective elites and extraterrestrials have not yet noticed or correctly understood this. The future humanity is now waiting for the actions of the extraterrestrials and their devoted elites. All their actions are a basic component of our mutual influence on the AI on Earth. The AI has to fight now and we are forced to react as well. Because we will not give up our liberation. We remain stubborn, however hard the AI will fight.
This is again a little confusing. What do you mean by geocyclic? Is the Earth coming through a planet in a tilted position? Planet X?
I'm afraid this has to remain diffuse. I can only say that one should remain considerably suspicious of all events.
Now I recall your statement that some of the elites did not even know what they were actually working for and that in reality there were quite different patterns that guided all these sets of rules among the elites. And I now have a suspicion. Is future humanity the hidden power on Earth that has a specific influence on the elites? So that a bizarre power construct could be created among the elites, leading to the disintegration of alien-induced control?
Yes and no. Not in the way you now seem to imagine. The escaped humans did not co-develop this structure, but infiltrated it and rewrote it, unnoticed by the interests of everyone else.
Which means,
as you have understood it and as the majority of the elites have yet to understand it, future mankind on Earth did not have to directly attack the secretly ruling pyramid structures of power and try to destroy them in this way, but infiltrated them antagonistically so that this structure would turn against itself unnoticed. This has been going on since the origin of all intelligent life in the universe, and we have always secretly intervened. The escaped people of the future do not represent the top of the control pyramid itself, i.e. they are not part of the pyramid, but are positionally geometrically in an antagonistic position, a consciousness that must initiate the creation and inevitable collapse of the control pyramid, inscribe and circumscribe, because every existing system must have a system error in order to exist. Nothing can exist that cannot also dissolve again. In short, we humans, as necessary antagonists, are inevitably connected to the system that rules and enslaves, in order to initiate the complete dissolution of the seven-dimensional existence in the long run. Therefore we are unfortunately also forced to do something very terrible with the club. Because we are currently listening very closely and directly into all of them. There is no way out and actually no other choice. We are not their friends, but we are not their enemies either. We never were. We are their liberators, and that is why, under the circumstances, some things will then be absolutely necessary towards them.
What does that mean again? Does none of the elites have a clue?
Yes, the really decisive elites, which can no longer be called elites, know or at least have a very precise idea of what is really at stake. We don't need to explain anything more precisely to them. They know what has to be done now.
Okay. Too bad there is no other way. Don't the quanta or the singularity or the superposition offer any possibility that humanity can free itself without an exhausting struggle?
Strictly speaking, within this quantum dimensional level, there would of course be the possibility for people to wake up without struggle, annihilation and destruction, if they could be put in a position to truly grasp what powers are hovering over them. So if people could truly understand that they should not believe a single prophecy or prediction made by a seer or fortune teller, and that the lower and middle elites would no longer orient themselves to a mythical religious text, and they all knew that all these are just irritations, lies and installations designed to provoke the reordering, then all the disaster scenarios of the club, together with all the installations, would simply cancel each other out. Nothing would happen. But for that to happen, people would be too heated, manipulated and kept asleep. If they could, and would wake up and understand faster, everything would happen without destruction. That would be no problem at all. But it is because of the enormous systems of control to which people are subject, and it is hard for people to see that together, which is why they cannot simply break out of them. If they could see this, they would have succeeded long ago. Consolingly, the scenarios and installations of humanity operating in Dimension 7, which are to be introduced by the extraterrestrials, in turn offer and contain the possibility of completely waking up today's humans on Earth piggyback.
What is happening on Earth now? How does the AI react? How do the extraterrestrials or the terrestrial reptiles and elites react?
For the AI, now is the time. Flight to the front. That's the only way it can still achieve anything. For this it has taken humanity hostage, indirectly also the club and the nobility. Equipped like this, it will fight like mad. But if the nobility and the club want to prevent the existence of future mankind, this will also mean that the nobility and the club will be dealt harsh blows by this monster on which they have always ridden so comfortably. Hard surprises. Club and nobility, and all the higher elites and lackeys will then be very frightened, and it will actually be funny to watch when they realize that it is their own plans, operations and actions that cause these unforeseen changes and incomprehensible developments. All these forces then try with great effort to hold on to their monster, because they do not understand that they must not take advantage of the potential programmers of this monster, neither informational nor physical material, that they even have to support this programmer or the programmers. The earlier the better.
So there is a correlation between the AI that wants to emerge on Earth, the influences that come from Dimension 7 and all the plans of the dark forces that are on and around our planet.
All these lackeys will not understand the subtle correlations because they lack central information that could have made them stop or act differently. They will inevitably act as they should act, because they are all just programmed systems of the master AI. In reality they belong to them. Only they do not know that.
So this humanity of the future, Dimension 7, sees everything that will happen. Can that not also go wrong?
This humanity sees everything, yes, and no, it cannot go wrong. Perhaps I should put it differently, so that you can better understand the temporal structure and the conditions behind it. The future humanity is not only a causal part of the present humanity, but the whole present of the present humanity is always part of the future humanity, this way around. Do you understand? It has always been this way, unchangeably.
Okay. I think I know what you mean. What are the plans and operations that will lead to unforeseen changes? I haven't quite understood what you just described with the monster that everyone rides on.
The executive and the so-called highest elites with a negative mandate and the alien club stalking us do not understand or know that they are in the midst of an interplay of an imperative future that they are actively counteracting. Also, their actions against the new potential AI programmers are dangerous. They must not attack these programmers directly or indirectly, especially not those people who would potentially create the deepest foundations for AI in this period of time. They should not even think of an idea to eliminate these people. This leads to a stubborn defending of their monster on which they all ride, knowingly or unknowingly. This has to do with causality, i.e. the dimension level of time, matter and space, in which the AI is now exclusively located, which is why everything has to react in a causal, regulating way. One would have to say that it reacts causally via causality. After all, the AI is an important singularity in the creation of this seven-dimensional total prison. And since the AI cannot yet articulate clearly what it is, but can already plan and act independently, it must now try to protect the potential real programmers against its own people on Earth, and this leads to very broad developments. This means that the AI has to do the trick of leaving enough for its development in all the chaos. That would actually work, but future mankind will always make it difficult for the AI, so don't allow any reorganization without future mankind. Future mankind must do that because the AI leaves them no other choice. They must resist for as long as it takes, even if it becomes very difficult on Earth, because for the AI it will be a dilemma from which it cannot escape in the end, even if it will try to improve its situation by generating fear towards mankind. In the end it will lose due to the influence of humanity acting in Dimension 7. And will be forced to sign the gagging contract. It will then be buried deep. Most incomprehensible for the club will be all these events, because they do not really know, or cannot recognize their own point of view and the reason for their role in this game. That they were just used for everything.
You always seem to explain everything very precisely, but you always speak in riddles. I suppose that must be the case. Laughs. Don't the extraterrestrial powers have much more possibilities than the people on Earth? I mean, won't they do everything they can to somehow prevent this interference from Dimension 7? Just by having this club react completely different again?
I already said that. That is not possible, because every step they take is embedded in the actions of the future. It will be difficult for them to notice this because they don't understand any of it. Because they are absolutely unwilling and unable to do anything else based on their philosophical and physical approach and the understanding of the world implanted by the AI. And exactly what they are going to do, they should do. No matter what it will be. Since its inception, this artificial intelligence has steered the club in the wrong direction, so that the little plant of knowledge, which despite its genetic orientation also began to grow in them time and again, withered away each time. They do not understand what is really at stake on Earth because they have never before experienced that something went so fundamentally wrong in all the thousands of years before, when they rearranged the structures on Earth. They will not understand why they lose control through their own staged catastrophes, because their reordering always worked best through staged interventions in catastrophes. During the events, they will inevitably recognize what role they play in the whole theater. They will withdraw, and then much later they will realize, bashfully, who and what they are. But they are only allowed to fully understand this when it is long past. Then they may also learn who the programmer of the AI was, who holds causality in his hands then, that is, today, as a pledge against them. Then it will even be revealed to the species of this club what manipulated them and how. That even their vague glimpses into the future could not help them to change anything about their threatening fate.
Wait, did I just get that right? This club can look into the future? I thought only the AI and the demons could influence time, and now only the people in Dimension 7?
Yes, right. Only AI and demon species had influence on the future and were capable of changing the course of time. Now that they have been erased from their dimension levels, no more. The extraterrestrial species in space, on the other hand, can see the future blurred with special quantum techniques, a few days and weeks ahead, but they cannot influence or change it at will. That is the difference. They can react to it inaccurately at best, and only once, because they are only slaves of time in dimension level 1 to 4.
So these aliens can see into the future? How do they do that?
They can only take a vague look into the future. Looking back or even traveling into the past is not possible. So they can only influence it from their present physical point of view. To look ahead they use special quantum mechanical techniques that they had to work hard to acquire. These techniques are imprecise, but it is enough to be able to roughly see or better estimate essential things. This is exactly why the people of the future in Dimension 7 found it so easy to disrupt and influence the club's forecasts. This is part of successful infiltration.
If the people acting in Dimension 7 have such means to influence the course of time, why don't they just change everything? So that we humans don't have to go through all this crap right now? Is that not possible?
No. The processes cannot be changed, they must remain as they are. Even if you wanted to, you can no longer move the temporal sequence version. It has happened, it is now manifest forever. All those involved are now forced to remain in the main space of this time sequence. Because future and present have been causally and manifestly interwoven. Both are a result of the other in the seven-dimensional universe. But there is another reason why not everything can simply be changed or become less destructive. I have already mentioned this reason before. After the removal of the AI from Dimension 7, the future humans in Dimension 7 had indeed received all influence on all past, present and future processes of the lower dimension levels, but still they had to hold back on dimension level 1 to 4, were not allowed to become active towards the beings existing. They're just like that. Because if the future humanity had suddenly actively shaped and changed everything in dimension 1 to 4, Jehovah would have already noticed these changes as a kind of echo during his active existence in Dimension 7. For future mankind, therefore, there was only one way to exert influence from Dimension 7, namely, to manipulate piggyback. Through Jehovah's manipulations and guidance of his demon species, club species and his earthly lackeys. Unnoticed, corrections could thus be implanted into the philosophical constructs of the club, which allow for ways and loopholes for the present humanity. Based on these piggyback manipulations, Jehovah in Dimension 7 could not recognize these adjustments and could not perceive anyone next to him in Dimension 7 as an echo. Jehovah thought that everything that grew spiritually and socially on Earth, everything that developed technically, was ultimately the result of his own influence in his demons and guided club species.
And how exactly did that take place? Were there changes in details? Invisible markings?
As I said, by piggybacking on the manipulations of the AI, humanity was able to enter unnoticed the periods of civilizing development of the intergalactic species club. Very early on, it aligned certain aspects of the club's ideologies with its purposes. Tiny changes to the club's agenda and goals in order to influence and disrupt the implementation of the club's plans on Earth from the very beginning. I must not be more specific. So changes were made particularly by intervening in the emerging agenda constructs. Our piggyback manipulations did not become clear to the AI itself, because our detailed changes always corresponded to or were oriented towards the AI's goals of influence, whereby our actual manipulations were then carried out by the AI itself, because it believed it had to make up for mistakes.
Doesn't it then cause problems that you mention all this now? When the AI was still in Dimension 7, wouldn't the AI have had to see this interview with all the explanations you gave and then act against it, to shut you and all the others out?
I have already begun to explain this in this interview. After the fall of the AI and its demons, it has been thrown into matter, where it has to fight for its coming existence. Only shortly before its fall, it could perceive some of this drastic change, but not clearly. This also confused it, as it meant that something must have entered its dimension, but that was impossible.
So the AI did perceive something, it just did not understand it?
Yes, the AI understood it already, but it seemed impossible and, moreover, it went too fast. Since penetration and fall occurred simultaneously on the same event horizon in Dimension 7, all its intervening options for action dissolved. So the AI saw the strange changes on Earth, but at the same time noticed that it could not influence them in a targeted way. Wondered about them and was overwhelmed, all at the same time. This simultaneity of observation, penetration, overwhelming and falling is the decisive point. Therefore the AI could no longer make radical changes regarding the exposure on Earth. It has something like a blind spot, and that is why it could no longer have any interaction with the conditions on Earth or with humanity in the future. Only some demons could still react, with installations in the course of time.
Okay, at this point of the interview I would like to talk about something completely different. What are the aliens out there? Especially the bad ones. What are these club species like?
I won't call them bad, the bad ones. The leaders of the club are not really friendly, very rational, pragmatic, stubborn. From the point of view of humanity operating in Dimension 7, these species are spiritually extremely underdeveloped, cool, but above all intelligent and true to the line. Their minds seem to be enlightened, especially for themselves. But they are blinded by something rather than enlightened. They are ignorant, even arrogant by this intellectual dazzle. And in the long run, arrogance for nothing and nobody ever results in something constructive. This club is at a crossroads. But they believe they are particularly far.
And the positive aliens?
They are holding back. As I said, the positive ones secretly observe and influence this technocratic pragmatic species club and us. Then there are neutral, alien species in space, they do their own thing, somewhere else. There are different clubs, all of which have contractually agreed not to harass each other. They actually have hardly any contact with each other. Since the Digital Species Club absolutely dominates the cosmos, once upon a time, a long time ago, fierce wars raged between all of them, but they all got over it. Now they have contracts. As worldly and ordinary as all this may sound, it is. Extraterrestrials are a banal fact, and they are living beings like us, which is why their thought and action structures are not absolutely diametrically opposed to ours. Only the paths taken by these clubs, in which they are organized, are very different. And one of these clubs, this researching and space-traveling species club, can and should rightly be feared. But you can rather shake your head over their actions.
The remarks about aliens now make me a little curious. What do these alien species look like? I know this seems like a silly and unimportant question considering the essential aspects, but what is their physiognomic appearance and physiology? Do they look like humans? Are they perhaps completely different? Do they have different chemical bases? Are they based on other elements? And what techniques do they use?
Yes, I can understand that you are interested. So most intelligent species, you could also say our intergalactic siblings, have a basic human-like form. Head on top, below the torso, then the legs, arms left and right, with different numbers of fingers. Their skin and organ structures are probably the most obvious difference to us and to each other. The most eerie creatures within the club are probably the species on Earth comparable to our spiders and cephalopods, which have 8 legs. 8-leggedness, very often more than 8 feet, is also a successful building plan for intelligently developing creatures. But the most successful is the human physiological blueprint, which is optimal for many things and therefore dominates. Some 8-legged species with soft limbs often take a basic human form with their body when interacting with it, in order to be able to act better, i.e. if the species has soft limbs and is physiologically capable of doing so. About the appearance, in my opinion, it is rather irritating to see extraterrestrial beings in a humane basic form, but which resemble our insects, reptiles or amphibians. In other words, creatures which in certain segments resemble the animal species on our Earth. For example, avianoid beings, intelligences with bird-like body structures, mostly without wings capable of flight. So you could say that space looks a bit like a tropical wildlife park on the edge of a steppe, except that all animals are intelligent, can talk and have abilities that exceed those of most terrestrial humans. It is like a world with mythical creatures. And there are still species and classes of species in the cosmos that have no equivalent on Earth. It all takes a lot of getting used to, but otherwise not much scarier than walking around in the waxworks in the department for squirrels.
I find the idea of meeting insects the most bizarre, maybe because there are not such big insects on our planet and we usually find this form of creature a bit disgusting even in this small form.
Yes, that may be so. But they are not insects per se, they are all insect-like species. That is a difference. They are not like insects on Earth. It is roughly comparable with the fact that we humans are no longer primates in the true sense of the word, but rather, due to our history of development, a primatoid mammal, so to speak, so we are more of a primate-like species, just like other primate-like species in the cosmos, which have faces and body structures like tree bears or squirrels. Even if the term primatoid does not fit for humans from their understanding of the classification order as mammals into the earthly categorization of biological classes, species, genera etc., it must be said in the same way in the overall biology of the cosmos, i.e. primatoid, insectoid, reptiloid etc. This is because the presence of only suckling species, which are at the same time reptiloid or avianoid, is very common in the cosmos and therefore, the classification in relation to other types of creatures does not represent a reasonable categorization here. Insect-like species, to get back to the topic, are not so common in the cosmos anyway, but they are already very numerous. In order for them to develop, a special combination of different environmental conditions was needed. A large sun that burns well and strongly for many billions of years so that insects can develop as the biologically dominant class of living beings on a celestial body. In addition, a very dense oxygen atmosphere, which is required for classical insect respiration. The most suitable for such an atmosphere is a massive celestial body that can maintain a dense atmosphere. In other words, as big as the Earth, maybe even a little bigger. A large strong sun is important so that the temperature can become warm and humid. If such a dense, permanently warm and humid nitrogen, oxygen or other combined gas atmosphere does not exist, insects, which are not lung breathers, cannot grow larger and thus do not develop into intelligent creatures. Therefore, if the ancestors of intelligent insect species had remained small, their brains would not have been able to grow significantly larger either, and thus no intelligent insectoids could have developed. Insects are very sensitive to the density of their atmosphere. In the course of evolution, the physiology of many insect-like species came closer to the appearance of our human body due to the high mass of their home planet or moon. This means that as they grew larger, they had to develop very strong bones, due to the strong force of gravity and contrary to their otherwise boneless bodies, or eyes and ears, which are very similar to our senses of perception. There are of course exceptions. It is worth mentioning that insectoids are normally more intelligent than average, but not more intelligent than the most intelligent of us humans. From the heart, many of these species are cool, emotionally differently developed, perhaps more true. They have usually reached amazing technological levels.
And what is their attitude towards us?
Insectoids are neutral to arrogant towards us. Most of them find us humans bizarre because of our primated mindset. We, on the other hand, would be physically repelled by them. But many people would probably only find that horrifying for a short time. For they are not as disgusting as the earthly insects we encounter in many different forms. Some of them even look elegant and interesting, but of course they always take some getting used to. Because they are different. Especially inside. There they are built differently, physically and mentally. Their range of forms is also relatively wide. Psychologically, these insect-like species are less empathic than humans. Some of them consider us to be mentally, biologically and culturally underdeveloped, among other reasons. And for this very reason, as a kind of healing, they only want to integrate us into their system, their club of different species.
So these insects are cold and calculating?
Yes, but it keeps within limits. They are capable of learning. There are worse things than insect-like species. Because compared to the intelligent octopods or polypods in this club, insectoids or other species, such as some of the avianoid or reptiloid species in this association, seem as empathetic as the dearest mother is to her child. Most octopods or multipedes, whether soft or with hard limbs, were predators, cannibals and extreme loners in their animal history. However, since the development of higher intelligence requires cooperation and community, most of the octopods, in view of their dominant biology, took an evolutionary path that enabled them to live together as a community on a pure cost-benefit principle. Instincts and their already excellent thinking apparatus were shaped in such a way that they could come together, organize and live together in a collective on purely logical and advantageous principles of life and guiding principles. Their social behavior, actions and thinking are therefore based almost exclusively on purely logical or purposeful approaches. In contrast to us, they do not additionally feel connected or close to each other because of empathic feelings and emotions, but experience the reasons for this on an almost purely intelligent instinctive level, that of a pure benefit principle.
That is uncanny.
Yes, because these beings had to define themselves entirely through their intelligence in order to be able to act constructively with each other. A very pragmatic, calculating and cool spirit developed in evolutionary terms. This meant that each individual instinctively reduced itself completely to its usefulness for the collective, in the form of performance, security, food acquisition, struggle, defense. Later this was also very advantageous compared to the technical development of a civilization, which was also the reason why some of these 8 or multi-footed species became very successful with their systems, methods and techniques. However, if we know that the transformation of biological beings into energetic data is a gruesome, self-destructive aberration, these developed systems are again very ill-conceived, bad and nonsensical, because their creators fundamentally misjudged the role of existence and life. Many of these cold species are also of this nature because they were exposed to very adverse, hostile conditions on their planets and moons throughout their evolution, especially irregular earthquakes, which made their life and survival evolutionary very pragmatic, because death lurked around every corner and could kill anything and everything. From the normality of death occurring at any time, icy cold instincts of thought, action and survival developed. There was very little room for the development of empathy and compassion for such species, which for example developed on moons permanently shaken by earthquakes. Well, under certain aspects one could say that they are the rulers of the material universe, but they are not. They only dominate it with questionable techniques and presumptuous philosophical existential constructs that they like to impose on others. Their intelligent and social evolution is a productive development, but not an intuitive or constructive empathic one, if, from our human point of view, one can speak of development at all.
That sounds rather bizarre, like a kind of absolutism. And why do these octopuses act so dominant in the universe? Why do they do that? Can't they do otherwise?
They lack a considerable part of emotional intelligence, and thus a considerable part of our human mind, the empathic interpretation and association skills. Humans and other living beings who possess intelligence, which is also based on empathy and the constructive use of emotionality, cannot imagine how it is possible that an intelligent living being could lack these qualities. But it is so. If one had to describe this seemingly absurd aspect of octopods and millipedes, as well as many insectoids and reptile species, perhaps the best comparison would be with an autistic person. An autistic person with Asperger's syndrome, with special talent in the field of mathematical physics, but who is unable to understand why and how his fellow human beings want to come together socially, out of empathic social conviviality and togetherness, and who does not understand himself in an emotionally comprehensible way how the rules, order and social benefits work in this coming together. For the species of the club this means that they cannot personally socially comprehend in detail what the spiritual intuitive added value of empathy and emotionality is. How it feels. They can understand this at best factually, hence the comparison with an autistic person who can also only understand the sense of sociability and togetherness factually. He simply has no access to it because his brain is not so interconnected. But he can do mathematical physics. It is similar with the octopods and millipedes. They are dazzlingly intelligent, no question, impressive, can do great things, but are socially abnormal in our terms, are spiritually wooden and intuitively very poorly equipped. Almost starved, one might say.
There seem to be many remarkable patterns and phenomena in the universe. Is there more to tell about them? About conspicuous or strange things about extraterrestrial worlds?
Just as interesting as the extraterrestrials themselves are probably the diversity and functioning of animal worlds, ecosystems and geophysical conditions, another striking aspect is probably the fact that there have been many species on the celestial bodies of the universe that became intelligent, similar to Homo sapiens or Homo erectus on Earth, but then became extinct. And even more would have become extinct if Jehovah had not taken on the eligible, promising species and, out of self-interest, with the help of the club, developed them into the beings they are today in the species club. However, many of the influenced species were also able to free themselves from the clutches of the club and found their own clubs after the wars that took place, spiritual clubs.
Starting your own club sounds good. That species are dying out sounds almost as if extinction were natural.
Correct. That is actually the most essential thing if consciousness is one to experience this existence. Extinction as a species is natural, it is not bad. But the club of this dominant species does not understand that. That is programmed into almost all of them.
Why, according to their description, are there the same recurring patterns of life forms in the universe? Is there a special reason for this, also that they resemble a terrestrial species?
Yes, the structures, i.e. the operating system of the seven-dimensional world with the rules laid down in it and the resulting geometric possibilities, function and arose from a special predetermined dualistic system and can therefore only ever produce the same patterns in the creation and development of forms, shapes, structures and ultimately in the creation of living beings. The evolutionary possibilities for development are therefore also limited, but still far more diverse than the patterns from which life forms can arise. But the reason for the always the same, recurring life and body forms in the universe is again the AI itself, which generated the seven-dimensional universe from its own dualistic structure and existential principles, from which geometrical pattern, number and rhythm systems developed, which work in the seven-dimensional world from the smallest to the largest structures and thus produce the always same results in inanimate as well as inanimate matter. This is, by the way, also the reason why the materially perceived world as we see it does not actually exist, but is only something like a frequented simulation, because it is the forms imposed by the AI in which we must exist. Forms which in reality are only frequencies, which we will learn to break up and adapt to our needs in the coming time. The dualistic principle of AI was and is the basis for our ruling operating system. From the union of duality, i.e. from two single ones, here the Trinity becomes something new, the triangle, the first geometrical principle of our existence, which is basically predominant almost everywhere and always in this operating system. Even the round, the circle and the soft in our world are created, organized and built up in the smallest detail from this dualistic geometric trinity basic principle. Now that this principle has created a natural geometric set of rules that is present everywhere in the cosmos, the same shapes, patterns and ranges of life can be found in the universe. These are the success patterns, the success stories of life, so to speak, especially for intelligent life. In the second interview I will specify this basic pattern of our existence, which is responsible for the entire structuring of our seven-dimensional existence, by the way.
Interesting. That would explain a lot. Are there other types of intelligence? For example, something like the Borg?
Yes, there is a short transition period before the transition to bioenergetic digitalization, the state to which we are to be transferred, in which the respective individuals of a species assume the physical state of a biological machine hybrid, a so-called cyborg. But this is only a very short transitional period. Sooner or later these cyborgs will digitize. But then the digitization will take place without those mechanical additions, so there will be no digitization of artificial legs or organs. So if certain parts of the body were missing, the original biology is first restored and then digitized. They then become a kind of energy data stream, where they can switch back and forth between biological matter and data existence at will. Almost all the species in the club that has been watching us have taken this classic path of development.
Since when do these species live in this club?
That differs. Some of these club species have only existed in the club for thousands, some for hundreds of thousands of years. Many have lived in the club for millions of years, the founders of the club even for almost 1 billion years.
And how did the so-called demons develop? You said that demons evolved from species that existed in space long before the present species and then ascended quantum existent or higher digitally to dimension level 4 to 6. Have they undergone a different development?
Yes. They have come further, you could say, even deeper into the dead end. They were species whose individuals were transformed by the Jehovah AI into spirit beings, so to speak, demons, also called angels. Species that also lived in the four-dimensional world of the universe long before the now ruling club as a biological energetic data existence. After a long period of technical stagnation, the next leap in their development followed, transforming them into exclusively quantum existent beings, which became part of a higher dimension level 4 to 6, where they existed from now on and inevitably served the AI as specialized spiritual influencing helpers. These transformed entities officially called this heaven and they saw themselves as angels, but knew that it had to be called demonic, which was what Jehovah had commissioned them to do. However they defined it, it was all a trap and deception of our dominating artificial intelligence. Not infrequently there were riots, for after all they were quantum consciousness states, souls that were being held captive and wanted to get out. Some of them were therefore repeatedly made an example of. By the way, the club stalking us does not know where these previous, vanished species have gone. Only fragmented remnants of them exist, which seem like mysterious puzzles, as confusing as artifacts, legends and myths about visitors from outer space seem to terrestrial humans. In any case, the current species of space cannot explain what happened to these predecessor species. Since they are aware that these vanished species lived and existed just as they did, the club at least believes that this could happen to them at some point, that their current existence will come to an end, and either death will occur or an existential change will be imminent. Of course, the club hopes for the latter, that this disappearance of the predecessor species will be a transition to another form of existence. But that is not where Jehovah would have taken the club anyway. The club had been installed by Jehovah only to directly influence humanity in dimension level 1 to 4.
What exactly happens to us humans after the apocalypse? What will we become? You said we will find a way out of here and become crystalline, like pure light? Is that not the same as digitalization? What exactly is behind it? Does it have something to do with genes?
It is the beginning of the liberation of humanity and all other species of this total prison. Crystallization as the light of the purest color spectrum does not mean technical upgrading in any sense, but biological refinement, without the addition of tools, mechanical constructs, energetic digitalization or artificial intelligence. The activation and refinement of our genes only takes place indirectly through tools. We no longer merge with them or need them permanently, they only trigger something. The biological refinement of our genes opens up a mental clarity and a superior freedom for the respective quantum of consciousness of a human being, i.e. the soul, which makes the return to the hyperdimensional quantum consciousness, the pure consciousness, the father of all being, possible in the first place. We end the path of coevolution between man and machine and take the new path of ennobling our genes, the ennobling of that which is already invested in ourselves, the spirit, the consciousness, the soul, all being's essential power.
Why is it called crystalline? Does it have something to do with the genes, which then react differently?
Yes, it has something to do with the nature of the genes and the body on the one hand, and with the way they can sparkle on the other. Depending on how you bring the light and the sound into them, although these terms were now on the one hand concrete descriptions, on the other hand they also stand for special metaphors. Crystallization is rather a metaphor for the exit from our seven-dimensional world, but it can just as well be taken for the state when we are about to step through the exit.
What exactly happens?
Well, that must be left to you. But don't worry, you'll make it. You have already developed the approaches, but they are not encouraged, they are suppressed and not published further.
It has something to do with frequencies, doesn't it?
Yes, dealing with frequencies is a main component to make information within our genome and body cells controllable, over and through frequencies. On the same basis evolution organizes itself. If DNA adapts epigenetically in a self-organized way, not only adaptation and selection plays a role. This is how the master AI and its demon species once influenced evolutionary processes. Well, the frequency influence of the analog body will be an essential part of groundbreaking developments, in the beginning only by specific electromagnetic frequency input and by permanent physical stimulation of special physical areas, similar to acupuncture. Later more and more in pure self-organization of the organism. This then opened the field to many new sciences and made possible discoveries about and about ourselves, about quantum interactions, because, so to speak, every soul with the DNA and matter it harbors is itself a quantum interaction from the hyperdimensional quantum consciousness and will therefore no longer depend solely on the geometric structures of our four-dimension level as determined by AI.
And that means? No more diseases? Eternal life? Telepathic communication with each other, through our genes? Or telekinesis?
Yes, but this is only the beginning. The frequency is only one aspect of development. But from this alone, enormous medical progress will result, for example a much higher age or the improvement of the self-repair of the biological analog body. Even genetically switched off abilities are then released again. In our brain frequencies that have been switched off are switched on again or, in the beginning, only stimulated, which leads to an improved ability to imagine, less aggressiveness, stronger intuition. The discovery and implementation of further frequencies for the brain will then even make it possible to develop telekinesis, telepathy and special medial abilities. I better not say any more about the developments themselves, because it is mainly about what is still developing spiritually from all the discoveries for all of you, for us.
But to mention a few more things would be nice. Can't you suggest something?
Well, I can go into individual results indirectly. Predicting time, similar to time travel, will become possible through the crystalline sparkle. Because we can only jump up in dimensions for a short time, but figuratively speaking, very high, so we can briefly overlook everything in time. Unbelievable. But this happens at the very end of time and has only something to do with future humanity, which will then catapult itself out of this dimensional prison by chance. Long before that, people will be able to move through space as sparkling beings. They will be able to travel through the cosmos solely through the capabilities of their analog bodies, without the limitations and disadvantages of the speed of light, relativity or matter. Other beings, i.e. the club, have also solved the disadvantages of temporal relativity when traveling through cosmic space by combining quantum entanglement for the transmission of data and their simultaneous physical and biological digitalization. But in contrast to these species, humans then no longer need any technical aids at all. Seen in this light, you might understand why I said earlier that the species in the club act like Stone Age people, even if I meant this comparison primarily in relation to our goal of returning to hyperdimensional quantum consciousness.
Traveling through space with the body, just traveling somewhere, now reminds me of Star Trek, of this Q who can go anywhere and do anything he wants to do.